Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Demon Folklorist. I am, the Demon Folklorist, Victoria J, and today we're going to be talking about reincarnation and past lives. This episode is based on a question from Gia. She had wondered what I thought about it, and the truth is I had never really looked too deeply into it. So, once again, y'all, ask questions. Talk to me. Tell me what you want to see, because I may actually want to look into it myself. So, all right, the concept of reincarnation has been around for a very long time. Seems to have come from the Far East, although we see it in Europe as well. Ancient pagans believed in it. Druids seemingly did, although we don't really know for sure since a lot of what they did is shrouded in secrecy and mystery. We have Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism, who all currently believe in it, though not every single person does believe in it in those religions. Through Ian Stevenson's work, we see commonalities of these cases of claimed reincarnation. So, in the previous reincarnation, 50% of people had a violent, tragic, or premature death. Children seem to remember a lot more details if they died dramatically, which is odd. Birthmarks that corresponded to the death of the previous life would be on the person's body. So, let's say if somebody was shot in the chest in their previous life, they would have some sort of mark in the exact place where they had been shot. Or I even read about a girl who had died from being burned alive. Oh, that's so awful. She had died from being burned alive, and then on her body she had these red sort of rash-like burns, but they were birthmarks. Again, also very odd. Children usually begin to explain their past lives as soon as they can communicate them. Usually the previous life's family is identified by the child. Either they search for them, or the parents search for them, or they come across them at some point in their lives and they're like, oh, I know you. You know why I know you? Because I was your mother, I was your father, I was your sister, whatever. I was your husband. Like, that's how it goes. So physical appearance apparently doesn't change very much between lives. You essentially kind of look the way you did in the past life, which, that's fascinating. I mean, is there something inherently tied to our appearance that holds part of us? I don't know, but it kind of suggests that. Also, personality traits and habits, likes and dislikes, even jobs or talents seem to follow people into their different lives. So if you had an amazing, talent for drawing, you probably have that now, just like you did in your past life. Often the relationships the person had before, if those people are still alive, so let's say you were somebody's wife in a past life, often people tend to maintain those relationships within their new lives because they remember so much of their old life. People are usually the same gender as they were in their past life. That isn't every single time, and there are times where people feel like they've been put in the wrong body. It really depends, and it's thought that maybe this is why trans people and two-spirit people from Native American lore exists, that it's because you were put in a different gendered body than you had in your previous life. I personally don't know, but it is really interesting to think about those implications of soul migration. It's possible. It's definitely possible. I'm not going to pretend that I understand the trans experience, but I respect how people feel and how they want to present themselves to the world. If trans lives matter, y'all. Anyway, children often realize their past memories and usually disown their parents in some way, being like, oh, you're not my real mom because I remember my real mom, or what have you. And then the average interval between lives is about 2 years. People who come back usually come back within about 2 years. That is a shockingly short amount of time. I love the idea that people we love come back to us. So recently here in Mexico, me and David went out to eat. We got some Chinese, and we had this little dog come in, and he looked like a German Shepherd puppy or something like that. He was adorable, such a sweet dog. So he just wandered in, just him, and he was kind of hanging out in this restaurant, and one of the girls who worked there wanted to take him home. I had gone to the bathroom, and my husband was talking to the girl who wanted to take him home, and she was showing him pictures of her previous dog who had actually died the day before. And it felt like her baby had returned, or that the universe was giving her a new baby. And I love that idea that we get back those we loved. I would love it if Salem came back to me. My sweet baby, he's actually asleep right now next to me. You know, we love them so much. So it was just a very sweet thing. It really just made me feel warm and fuzzy to believe that her baby came back to her. And even if it wasn't him, a lot of people who lose those they love or that they made a promise to seem to come back as a child usually born to that person. So sometimes a child dies and then comes back as the next child. And the way that you can tell that is through their likes and dislikes and their memories of a time when they were not born yet. There was this case of a girl who she had died, I believe, of illness, and she really loved to dance, and she knew specific dances because she learned them, and she had certain likes that she just really wanted to eat this certain thing. And then they saw those next things in a child that was born, I believe, just a few, maybe not even a few years later. It might have been within a year. So their next child seemed to remember these things and preferred to be called by her dead sister's name because she felt that that's who she was. So that's really interesting that, like, maybe if you die very suddenly or very tragically or very violently, you can come back. It really implies that there's some type of choice being made. And when a life is cut short horribly, I really just think there's comfort in the idea that they could be reborn, and that not only that, we could actually find them again. Then there's also the idea that maybe we didn't learn something we needed to know in order to ascend to a higher plane of existence, and that's why we came back. In that instance, it seems like it's less of a choice. Like, you have to come back because you're not ready for the next stage, whatever that stage is. It really depends on what you believe. It made me think, like, maybe that's what Dybbuk's are, and these ideas of these dead people who are just wandering the earth. They're barred from heaven and hell. They're from Jewish folklore. I talk about them a lot, so if you're a regular listener, you know what a Dybbuk is. But maybe it's just they haven't learned whatever lesson is being imparted onto them yet. So I've always seen, like, Dibukim, which is the plural form of Dybbuk. I've always seen what happened to them as a really serious punishment. That they did something that is going to cause them to wander. Maybe they're not bad enough to go to hell, right? If you believe in that sort of thing, of course. But, like, just the idea that you're being forced to wander, what a horrible existence. And that the only way you can even live again is to possess another person, which is, like, against the laws of nature. You're just kind of, like, not supposed to be there. Maybe it's not a punishment as much as a learning lesson. You have something that you need to know before you can pass on. And then we have reincarnations of famous events or people. And then they're very almost kind of more normal, like just within one family or within one town. It really depends on the person. And then sometimes it's just exposure to a place or an event in one's life that unlocks the memories. Most often it's regression hypnotherapy. It's when they put you under and then you regress somehow backward during the hypnotherapy so that you can assess those memories and access them. But I don't know what I think about this because it's not thought to be a real thing because you can actually implant false memories. But if some memories come through, you can't exactly say that they're false because I think probably end up knowing a lot more than you should. If someone was planting a false memory, right? That would be fairly easy to do. But knowing the level of stuff that people seem to know, that part I don't think is very easy. So it's hard to say. I'm not really sure what I think about regression therapy, but something I also notice is that a lot of these families who, even like from religions that believe in reincarnation, it's kind of rare, or at least rare enough that people are skeptical. People seem to jump to the idea that their children are crazy, more than maybe they're telling us the truth or the truth as they see it. It wouldn't be my instinct to think my kid was crazy, but then again, you know, with all my experiences as a psychic, things sometimes defy reality and defy what we think of as reality. So just because someone may not believe in reincarnation, it doesn't make it not real. In all of these cases, it features things about that person, things about their lives, about where they lived, about all sorts of things that the child couldn't possibly have known. Like, yes, did we all go through a bit of a Titanic phase? Possibly, me included. I also went through a major Egyptian phase, and these are all based off of what was coming out at the time. So The Mummy came out in 1999, and, you know, I just fell in love with Egypt. I fucking loved it. I even was trying to teach myself like hieroglyphics and all sorts of fun stuff. And my mom was all for it. She bought me all these different books, and like, yeah, like she just sort of fed that obsession, but it all stemmed from me seeing The Mummy at like age 5. And that went on for a couple years. I eventually kind of phased out of it, but I still have a passing interest in Egypt that I just sort of pick up every now and then. Oh yeah, Titanic, like I was fascinated by Titanic because it was such a big, huge tragedy. I researched and looked into it and found it fascinating, but books can only take you so far. There are some things that only the experts that cover that subject would know. And then, of course, there was like my obsession with King Henry VIII, which was based off a fiction book I had read at the time, and his wives and his children, and, you know, like we all get interested in things. But the kids who seemingly come back from these horrific events, they know things they should not know. They know things that aren't published, or even things that aren't published yet, or things that maybe have been lost to history. So it's fascinating. I mean, for instance, there was a kid in Israel who had been murdered in his previous life, and then he was able to point out the killer, who was a neighbor. They'd argued, and then the neighbor like axed him, and he was able to find the murder weapon and his body, and the man confessed. These are some really miraculous things. Now his family knows what happened. Now they can bury him. Now, of course, this does not dim the horror of the fact that, yeah, we live in a very dark world where people do murder each other and hurt each other. I think that reincarnation is so very comforting, because it makes you wonder if you could possibly have them back someday. Then we have Dorothy Louise Eady. So she fell down a flight of stairs as a young child and apparently died, but then she came back to life. She now had memories of a past life as an Egyptian priestess. So she was in the court of King Seti, and she apparently had a talent for the Egyptian language and totally freaked out in the British Museum, crying and wanting to be back with her people because of all the different artifacts from Egypt that are housed there that I think they should give back. But whatever, that's just me. Edie claims that she had a visit from the spirit named Hora. He was just like a regular spirit, because I was at first like Ra or like Horus, but no. Apparently he was just a spirit. He wasn't a deity. He explained to her all the blanks that were in her past life, that she was a virgin priestess and she had an affair with Pharaoh Seti, which led actually to a death sentence for her because it was such a serious breach of her vows during that time period. Instead of being executed, she had committed suicide. And she helped archaeologists uncover a hidden garden that they didn't know was there because she had been there before and she knew it was there. Hers was kind of interesting because her memories actually got stronger with age. Usually when kids have these memories, they fade over time and they adjust to their new life and these new set of circumstances. But no, not Edie. She probably connected very heavily over time and maintained that connection, is my best guess. Naturally, being me, I am fascinated by the horrible cases, by the super weird ones, right? Because, you know, that's just who I am. Although I do find it very comforting that people seem to come back. So we have the children who have these horrible, traumatic memories of dying in a past life, like the Titanic, 9/11, Japanese soldiers at war, Nazis in Germany, even one who claims that she's Anne Frank. The Titanic one was really fascinating. I watched a documentary on it. This boy seemingly came back as the ship's architect, Thomas Andrews. He knew way too much about the ship and the way it was built and the things that they had cut corners on, and such disappointment and guilt over the sinking. He had to experience it within nightmares, the full propensity of the sinking, for him to be able to come to terms with it. He kept having like night terrors of it, and he was terrified of water. And now he works in design, but he's completely at peace with his possible past life as Thomas Andrews. And, the fact that he works in design, that shows a lot that he's carrying on those architectural talents into this life. And then there's another kid who remembers a life as a Nazi. I don't want to tell that story because I'm not going to be talking about awful Nazis unless it's to tell everybody that they are toxic sludge in our humanity. But it's still like, why on earth would those things be happening? Why would you come back as somebody who was a former Nazi? Why is that allowed? Right? I don't understand. But, back to the Anne Frank one, are some of these people, the victims anyway, are they being reborn to simply have another life? Like Anne Frank and, the people who are on the Titanic, I can completely understand that. The others I cannot explain. Is there something that they need to learn, maybe about their horrifying past actions, like the Nazi guy? Or here's a question: if souls can transmigrate, is there such a thing as a soul who isn't meant to come back, but who's forcing it? Like a possession. Just a thought. I can't help but wonder why this would be allowed to happen, that children are having these horrible, horrible experiences, firsthand. What trauma to inflict upon a child? I mean, it's unimaginable, and yet it seems to happen. And then they seem to have to go through the experience once to fully put it behind them, and most people find it to be a fairly good experience, even though the horror of it was still there. I get it. I mean, I'm kind of the same way about my own possession. I'm just it's a thing that happened. It doesn't really affect me anymore, but it's still, it sucks. It didn't have to happen. Let's just be honest. I did not have to be possessed by something. I just think it's really brutal and a horrible thing for a child, for any child, to have to go through. And then something that I found really interesting is that children seemingly talk about the hierarchy of souls in what they perceive as heaven, that there are windows in heaven and they can choose their families. There are so many questions that I just don't feel we have the answers to. I just think life and death is stranger than we understand, and that's why I love the paranormal. There's always more. I don't think we'll ever run out of things to be researching. So here's a fun one, because it involves a woman who was able to heal something that is incurable. So a woman named Amy Weiss, it's either Weiss or Weiss. Normally when I see this spelling, I say Weiss. But anyway, she developed cataracts at age 25, which is very, very young. Normally you see this in a lot older people. So it's when your eyes become cloudy, the lens, and eventually you lose your vision, either partially or completely. So in her past life regression therapy, I don't know how she connected the two, but she seemed to remember a man living during the Middle Ages who was alone, and he was very poor, and he was thought to be a dark wizard by the townspeople. And these awful townspeople set fire to his home. His eyes were damaged in the attack, but he survived. But then he became very depressed afterwards, and I cannot blame him. Leave this man alone. Fuck. He's not doing anything to you, and even if he was a dark wizard, don't fuck with the dark wizard. Are you guys crazy? He clearly wasn't, though, but still, people are stupid. Anyway, Amy said that a message that had carried through is that sadness clouds the eyes, and she felt that she'd carried this blindness from that depression into her current life. And super weirdly, after this experience, her cataracts vanished. They can take cataracts out, but it doesn't really go away. It's not like a quick fix type of thing. And I'm going to be honest, I worked in an eye, but let's just say that cataracts just vanishing is not normal at all. It makes you think, what are some of the other things that are plaguing our bodies that, are not actually from what's happening right now? I believe that just like curanderismo does, that issues with the body aren't always just one thing. I think a lot of factors influence health, because I know a lot of factors influence my health, even just as a psychic. So, something to think about. Something interesting is that I personally feel a pull I can't explain to certain time periods. So one of them's antebellum South, which sucks, and then the other one is like turn of the century London. Now, we did have relatives on both sides of the Civil War. Who knows? Maybe I was alive then. I'm really hoping though that if I lived in the South, because it's specifically to the South that I feel that pull, I'm really hoping I was like an underground abolitionist and not a delicate racist Southern belle, because that would fucking suck. I don't really remember anything. I don't think I was alive. I just feel a pull to it that I just can't explain. It's the same with turn of the century London. Something about both time periods feel familiar, like I've been there, but I don't have any specific memories. I've also been told by a friend in college who had read my palm, she said that I was a fairly new soul. And that kind of makes sense to me as well. Although, I don't know, maybe I had family in London, because I definitely had family in antebellum South. So, yeah, like I don't know. I don't know how to explain that. And then one time, I feel that when I am my full self, I tend to make people cry. So there was this guy I was talking to when I was working at a hotel. I'd made them cry because we'd been talking about the loss of his children, and I tapped into my psychic stuff, and I don't always really mean to, but I tapped into it, and I told him that wherever his children are, they were warm and they were safe. That came through very clearly, that they're okay. And I can't explain why I think this, but I think they might have been growing in a new womb. I don't know. But that's really what I think, that his children were possibly being reborn at that moment and growing in the womb for 9 months. But I also felt that there was grace and mercy for them, that this next life is going to be much better. So I don't know. This is what happens when I'm my full self. I make people cry, man. And this is not the first time it's happened. But anyway, and then we have some really weird ones. The ones of people who claim that they had another life as an extraterrestrial. These ones are probably my favorite because of how, inherently strange they are. And then the possibility of it. So, Boriska Kiprianovic was a math, physics, and astronomy prodigy as a young boy. He claimed to have been living on Mars at one point, that it dried up and killed all the Martians because of a nuclear war tens of thousands of years ago. And Martians had mastered the process of aging, so everyone was 35 permanently and semi-immortal. Apparently, the Martians had a military that he was a part of, and they'd been visiting Earth during the Stone Age, helping humans out, including Egyptians, and yep, you guessed it, built the pyramids and the Sphinx. Which, why does nobody think that these ancient people could have done it themselves? I digress. That's my anthropology education talking. But supposedly, behind the Sphinx's ear is a mechanism that unlocks the secrets of the universe. And I can't imagine what that possibly could be, but it sounds fun. So, has someone looked recently behind the Sphinx's ear? I don't know. Another one is from hypnotherapist Robert T. James, who did a regression therapy. He remembered a previous life where he was an extraterrestrial on a spacecraft, and it had crashed in New Mexico. It's unclear what time period this was, but I mean, we're all thinking it. Maybe it was Roswell. He was a gray alien, and everybody was freaking out. He and the other extraterrestrials were freaking out on board because their ship was going to crash, and they wanted to use an escape pod, but they didn't have time. And then just the sheer G-force of when they hit the ground killed everybody aboard. He witnessed having an out-of-body experience once he died of 3 men in a military jeep coming to investigate the crash. So, I mean, I don't know. I love the idea of this, though. It's such, a great plot, even for like a novel. The idea of it being true is just so much fun. I'm not even sure if I care anymore if things are true. I'm not a historian, I'm a folklorist. But the stories are so good. They're so interesting. And they really give me pause as far as, well, maybe reincarnation is real. And that's really what I love about the nature of stories, that whether they're real or not, they're real to us. And yeah, I probably do actually believe in reincarnation now, but I don't know how it works. There's a lot of questions just this research has raised, but I do think it's entirely possible. I believe almost anything is possible, especially in the paranormal. Maybe death isn't the end, or at least not the end. Maybe it's only the beginning. So, there's some mummy wisdom for you. But yeah, I love the possibility of it. And even the idea that maybe we can choose. Anyway, enough of my ramblings. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. And if reincarnation is real, I hope you reincarnate into something lovely. Have a demon free day. Bye, y'all.